But to me, and to the other hundreds of players she's inspired, she's just Coach. In her nearly 40 years at Tennessee, Coach Summitt has elevated women's basketball to the national stage.
Well, I'd like to see women's basketball televised nationally, not once or twice, but on a regular basis. I think we have to have more television exposure.
Coach began her career in Tennessee at the age of 22, making $250 a month while washing the team unis herself. Before she turned 30, Coach reached her first Final Four. 5 years after that, she won her first national title.
Pat Summitt. She's been here 8 times, and she finally has the win.
And the victories kept coming.
She's been to the summit 3 times now.
And Pat Summitt wins the 4th of her Spartan career. National championship in 11 years.
Coach's most successful team came in the 97-98 season. The Lady Vols went 39-0, the only unbeaten team for Tennessee. Beyond the titles, it's the personal moments her players remember the most. The locker room speeches that motivated us all.
People who want to change stand up and go get it. They don't shy away from it. They're not nervous about it. They're excited about it. And they bring a big old attitude.
The renditions of Rocky Top.
Rocky Top, you'll always be close, sweet home to me.
And the tough love that culminated in the stare.
Crystal blue eyes are just looking right through.
All you have to do is look in her eyes. She doesn't even have to say anything.
No one can do the stare. Just sees threes. In 2000, she was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Life is great. I oftentimes tell our players it's never as great as it seems, nor is it as bad. This is pretty awesome.
You can probably trace the rise of the women's game with the rise of her basketball program. So she'll go down as one of the all-time greats in coaching.
She's a fine teacher and knows the game and works hard and becoming better all the time, not becoming satisfied and being able to keep her youngsters from becoming satisfied.
It has been nearly 1,000 years since the first battles were fought in what the Muslim East called Al-Hurub al-Salibiyah and the Christian West called the Crusades, the Wars of the Cross. For 200 years, blood was spilled in the name of God. Lines were drawn, alliances formed, and enemies made that endure to this day. Out of the bloodshed came legends of heroes, martyrs, and sacred relics like the Spear of Destiny and the Holy Grail. But of all the stories, the most mysterious is the saga of the Knights Templar. Though what has emerged may be an amalgam of both fact and fiction, one thing is certain. Few rose to such powerful heights or fell so quickly or so far. It is during the Crusades that the story of the Knights Templar begins. In 1095, major powers clashed throughout the Mediterranean and along the European borders. The medieval Roman Catholic Church in the west, and in the east, the Orthodox Christians and the Islamic Turks and Arabs.
Christian kings were very aware that this new religion was encroaching on their territories, so there was a political aspect. One trial in it, I think, was in Bavaria, which was attended by a troop of fully armed Knights Templar. They were found not guilty, not to anybody's great surprise, because the idea was if you find us guilty, we'll kill you.
Of the hundreds, possibly thousands of Templars who remain free, there is little record. Some retire or join other orders. In Portugal, where Templar built towns and castles held off the Moors for decades, they simply changed their name from the Knights Templar to the Knights of Christ.
After the order was dissolved, the Portuguese king allowed them to carry on as the Knights of Christ, but they were basically all Templars.
Even in France, where the prosecution is the most vigorous, many Templars escape the mass arrests.
Very few Templars relatively were captured or imprisoned. Most escaped. In France, which is where the majority of the high-ranking Templars were located, only about 620 of 3,000 were captured.
But where did they go? And did they take the Templar treasure with them?
The most likely explanation is that slowly but surely they drifted away through eastern France up into the mountains.
In the 1300s, this mountainous region is only sparsely populated with small communities of farmers and shepherds.
Many of the trade routes from France went straight through the Alps, through that region, which we now call Switzerland. The Templars knew this region extremely well. They'd been using it for well over 100 years. But it was almost impassable, and many hiding places with little isolated communities where normal armies would not be able to operate. Nowhere would have been better for hiding what remained of the Templar treasure than in that region.
While there is no proof of the Templars escaping into the Alps with their treasures, it is interesting to note that the villagers in the region were undergoing a transformation about the same time the Templar order fell from grace.
Around exactly the same time as Jacques de Molay, the last of the leaders of the Templars, was being burned in France. Three small regions in what we now know as Switzerland were gathering together to fight against their overlord.
Duke Leopold I of Austria, who wants control of the Gotthard Pass as a shortcut to Italy, sends some 5,000 heavily armed knights to secure the region. But an ambush is waiting. Some 1,500 peasants block the route and attack from above, crushing the far larger force.
They became the most feared fighting men in Europe, but before that point, there's no evidence whatsoever that they were anything other than farmers. The Swiss had absolutely no military experience until that point.
the villagers undoubtedly used their innate knowledge of the mountain terrain to their advantage, some suggest they had another secret weapon.
There are folk tales from the period that say that armed white knights came to help them in the battles they fought.
Could they have been the remnants of the Knights Templar? If so, Switzerland may have proved the perfect place for both the Templars' military skills and business acumen.
We find people who had been fairly primitive farmers quite quickly turning themselves into seasoned soldiers and forging communities in which banking and proto-engineering were taking place. Really, there can be no coincidence.
The Knights Templar are considered by some to be the world's first bankers. Perhaps it's a calling they never abandoned. Did the Templars and their descendants found the Swiss banking system? One thing is certain, the Swiss themselves will never tell.
One of the things that really sets Switzerland apart, and always has right from its inception, is just how secret it is. The banking systems that were set up in Switzerland are not like those in other parts of the Western world. They are as pathologically secretive now as they were, which makes them exactly the same as the Templars.
Is this where the trail ends? Most Templars treasure hunters don't think so. The Templars, they note, did not have to escape overland. They had an entire fleet of ships at their disposal. Ships they had been using since the 1200s to transport people and trade goods between the West and the Holy Land.
We actually don't know how many ships they had. One thing we do know is that when the order fell in 1307, the entire fleet vanished.
There's more to history than you think. Did you know that Ben Franklin was